This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 54 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. We're talking all about the benefits of travelling with kids today. That's the benefits for the kids and for us as parents. As I record this, it's just reaching the end of the school holidays here in Western Australia. And I might have complained before that sometimes I find juggling working for myself with the school holidays a very tricky juggle. But this holidays, even though we didn't have a big overseas trip planned, or even we weren't even getting on a plane, I did manage to make a few plans to have some smaller trips around Western Australia. And those trips enabled me to, remind myself, I suppose, of many of the benefits of travelling with kids. For example, we spent a few days over Easter staying down in Busselton in the southwest of Western Australia. It's a beautiful seaside town with, incidentally, a jetty that is the second longest woodpile jetty in the world, the longest in the southern hemisphere. There's my fact for the day. I keep meaning to look up where the longest one is in the northern hemisphere, because really we need to go there now. In any case, we were staying in Busselton over Easter, and we discovered that Busselton, although being a relatively small town, has the best skate park ever. Now you might wonder, I am a 40-something-year-old woman. I definitely do not use a skateboard or a scooter on a regular basis. Skate park, maybe not my thing. And it's not my thing, but it is my 7-year-old's thing. And I'm a good mum, and I took him there, I think, 8 times in 4 days. But one of those times was at 6:30 in the morning. We were both awake. He knew that there'd be fewer of the big kids and big teenagers there at that time of day. And he asked me to go. I thought, well, why not? So I spent a lovely hour walking up around the skate park as the sun rose over the Indian Ocean, which was right next to the skate park. And those kind of scenes are those that never happen if you're not travelling with a kid who wants to get up that early. That was one of the lovely benefits. And just a few days back, we met some family in the Yanchep National Park, which is just north of Perth, and we went for a bushwalk. It was a nearly 3-kilometre bushwalk in the end. And of course, the kids all at the beginning said they didn't want to go, but then they did, and they were the ones way out in front. And somehow, just this morning, after being on that bushwalk, my son is more inspired about that kind of thing. And I was telling him about how I have this idea of one day the two of us going together on the Camino de Santiago walk in Spain. And I expected him to sort of say, and I was, when you're older, he goes, why do we have to wait until I'm older? And I still think he does need to wait until he's older, because he is only 7 and I'm not carrying his stuff. But I was so pleased that he was enthusiastic. So all of those little side trips have really helped him to remind me of all those benefits of travelling with kids. Now, my first guest today has another really good example. It's Natasha Lester, the Perth novelist who writes historical fiction, and she has some great things to say about when she has taken her kids travelling and what they've learnt from it.
The first time we went to New York was 2013 with the whole family, and so my kids were, how old were they then? After some maths, this was a problematic. Okay, they were 3, 5 and 7. And my husband was hugely doubtful about whether they would remember anything, and he thought it would probably be a complete waste of time taking them. But I'm pretty determined when I want to be, so I said, no, we're going to take them. And so they came along, and, just standing in, I remember vividly this moment of standing in the Museum of Natural History, and we were in front of an exhibition about evolution, so human evolution from apes to where we are now. And my 7-year-old daughter was standing in front of it, and you could just see the light go off in her head that this thing that she'd heard about, that humans were somehow descended from apes, which is like way out there, but then to see it like this in the museum all laid out for her, it was like it took her to this whole new level of understanding of that aspect of human history. Cool. And when she came back to school after that, her year 2 teacher said to me, you can see how much benefit that had to her, just in terms of even simple things like vocabulary. She was doing a reading test with the kids, and the word aisle was in there, which is obviously spelt quite peculiarly. look like aisle. And because Ruby had just been on a plane with an aisle, she just knew the word. And so just even simple things like that, improving vocabulary, improving their knowledge, making abstract concepts suddenly real. I think travel is, brilliant for that. And history can be pretty abstract. You hear about something like how many people died in World War One, for instance, and our kids can't imagine that happening because they've never gone through a war like that.
Exactly. Yeah, I can barely grasp that happening.
Yeah, exactly. But we went to, which probably sounds a bit macabre, we took them to the Invalides, so the museum of the War Museum in Paris, and it's really well done, and I think it really gave them an appreciation for how lucky we really are. You've obviously got to be careful with things like that. It can be a bit confronting for small children to see some of that footage and things like that. And certainly my 8-year-old is quite sensitive, and there's a couple of places where she couldn't look at it, and that's totally fine. Got to work within their emotional limitations and emotional range. But, I just think to read about it in a book is one thing, and that can be useful, but then to just see soldiers' uniforms and the Jewish stars, the yellow stars they had to wear, and the newspapers that were printed clandestinely against Hitler, and just it really gave them, my older daughter had read Anne Frank's diary. Then to put Anne Frank's diary together with this museum, again, just took that whole understanding to another level. So I think for kids, travelling is great. I honestly think it's better than school. They learn way more out there than they do at school, and in a whole different way. It's an experiential learning that they keep and remember. We still talk now about, the trips that we've done, and they will come up with anecdotes that my husband will be sitting there going, God, I don't even remember that, but they will.
Exactly. Yeah.
So definitely it's totally worthwhile taking kids, and it's an amazing educational experience for them.
I think, you're right. It's that physical experience of something makes such a difference to having seen it in a movie or documentary or having read about it, because they've got that whole extra dimension of reasons to remember it and reasons to sort of feel and understand it. So it makes a huge difference. Yeah. All due apologies to Natasha's husband, but I do love that he had objections to going because the kids wouldn't remember, and then he's the one who can't remember the anecdotes the kids are retelling after the trip. Just one more nail in the coffin of that argument of kids won't remember, so it's not worth going. I know we've discussed that on a previous episode. I'm going to put links in the show notes to the couple of other episodes where we've talked about travelling with kids and all of the good stuff it does for everyone. But certainly, as Natasha pointed out, the benefits are so wide-ranging and so many, and whether or not they remember every detail precisely is definitely not the point. So that was great stuff. Now, my next guest is new to the Thoughtful Travel podcast today. It's Alicia Nelson from the Prairie Style File. She lives in North Dakota and works as a journalist and has a 4-year-old son who has come on many travelling adventures with her already.
I think really the best tip I have for traveling with kids is just to go on adventures with them early. I think that's the main reason that my son, who's almost 4, travels as well as he does. Mm-hmm. It's just that he's always kind of gone along and he's comfortable in the presence of adults and he's comfortable exploring new places. And so he always knows that there's something fun that happens when we go in the car and we go on a road trip. He's used to that. So I have friends that are artists, and I remember them telling me it's wild that you have a 1-year-old in a gallery. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. And they go, no, it's great. Like, he's such a good little audience. Like, it's wonderful. Like, it's cool to watch a person that has no preconceived notions of what art is interact with art. And so I think that because I've been a reporter and a writer the whole time that he's been in my life, he's always known that. And we didn't always have reliable childcare up until last year. So he would come with me. And that, I think, has really changed the way that I travel and probably given me more benefits to my life than he gets from his. Because he has a great adventure. So, like, he'll have a great adventure if we're playing in the sandbox at the park, or he'll have a great adventure if we're going on the airplane and flying to Denver. Like, it's all cool to him. Like, and kids are great that way.
Oh, so adaptable. Just whatever happens to them happens to them. Yeah, so true.
And they're, like, equally enthusiastic about, like, I mean, we went to visit my brother in Denver, and Eli, my son, was really pumped that we got to ride in an airplane. He was really excited about that. But he was, like, equally excited to ride the free bus that took you up and down the pedestrian zone in downtown Denver. Like, we're, like, the same. Like, he was super excited about it. Like, he's like, this is what do you want? What I want to do today? I want to ride the bus. Like, that's what I want to do. And that's kind of fun, actually, because I feel like, he sees things now that I don't see. He's excited to ride public transportation more than anybody on the planet. So mundane things like that everybody else takes for granted are like awesome when you're a kid.
And it's so refreshing for you as an adult to experience that, isn't it? Because it's quite contagious.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, it's really hard to sit next to somebody with a delighted child, even if you don't really like kids. Like, I have friends that are not kid people, but they'll be on the bus with us and just laugh. And they're like, this is hilarious. Like, wow, like I take this ride all the time. Nobody likes this as much as you do, Eli. That's great. So that's fun, I think. And they make you slow down and look around and kind of appreciate. This sounds really like a big cliche, but like you appreciate the journey as much as the things on your itinerary.
Very true.
And I do think it's really great, too. My son goes to preschool, and they still nap, so he still naps. Oh. So we still build in a little bit of nap time when we can to the schedule. And I think that's great because then you're not – I think the enemy of, like, really great, deep, insightful travel is too many things on your schedule.
Yeah.
And so kids they sort of prevent that. Like, you have built-in downtime, which is nice. So, the adults in the party can kind of reflect and – hang out. But I think that makes you seek out quieter spots to nap. It makes you seek out, hotels that are really located in interesting neighborhoods, which is nice too. I don't always look for the best deal now anymore. I'm like, okay, where's the best, most centrally located, interesting place that we can be? So we don't have to drive 20 miles outside of the city to do the fun thing. Like, it's all right there. Yeah. And that's really... It's made me think about like every second of my travel day, not just the highlights. And I think that's been really great because then you enjoy sitting on a park bench. You enjoy checking out public art or gardens. My son's really into trains. So we spend a lot of time climbing up on railroad bridges and, just seeing things from different angles that I wouldn't ordinarily see.
Oh, absolutely. When my son was younger, he's finally grown out of it, but he had a real obsession with garbage trucks. And
too.
Yeah. And so, it's so infectious that I remember we were chasing the garbage trucks through the centre of Vienna. Like, I'd actually brought him up. We'd come on the metro and I brought him up near Stephansdom, big cathedral in the middle. I wanted to show him the cathedral, but we came out of the steps and there's this rubbish truck going past and he's like, oh! And so he was still in a stroller at the time. So I'm pushing him along and we're following it down these little side streets in Vienna. And, ordinarily it's not something I would do, but we had a ball and we actually stumbled across all these little kind of alleyways, which were gorgeous and stuff like that. I'll never forget in Dublin, he saw a purple garbage truck and it was one of his favourite colours at the time. He'd never seen a purple garbage truck and we were like so excited and chasing this thing down the road to get photos and those things don't happen if you're not travelling with a child. So
exactly. And now every time that you see a garbage truck when you travel, you're going to remember that because that's such a strange specific memory.
And it's quite fascinating to see how different countries deal with their rubbish. So
it is. And like, who would think of that except a kid? Eli is obsessed with fire trucks. And so we've been to, I'm trying to think where we've been this year, Minnesota, North Dakota, Colorado. And then we have friends that have traveled too. And like, that's his question is he's like, what color are the fire trucks? Like same as the garbage trucks. Like that's exactly what he really wants to know. Yeah. He doesn't care where's good to eat in your town. He doesn't care about the landmarks or the cool attractions. Like, no, he wants to know your fire truck. And then it's really fun to watch other people who might be visiting stop and be like, boy, I don't know. Huh? And then they go back and then they report back on the color of their fire trucks. Like, that's funny. Like, adults aren't going to do that to each other. Like, kids are great. It could be a good story.
It is. It's so much fun. It was so wonderful to chat with Alicia and be reminded of the garbage truck obsession my son used to have and all the weird and wonderful places around the world where we studied the garbage situation in great detail. One I didn't mention in our chat was in Penang. We arrived back at our hotel one day just in time to see the recycling truck arrive, and we got to watch, I think, 4 or 5 workers separate out the garbage then and there in the truck to all these different compartments. And I still remember it in great detail, just as my son does. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's interesting to compare how these things work around the world. And I would not have had those experiences without my son. So for him, I'm grateful for many, many reasons. My final guest today is Mark Wyld from Wyld Family Travel. And he has 2 daughters who are, I think, 8 and 11 now. And I chatted to Mark about what it's like for the kids to be travelling to Europe multiple times in their life. And I chatted to him just ahead of his winter trip to Europe last year.
I think that's one of the great things about taking our kids travelling is to have them experience that side of life. I like to say that, I often say to people, like, it's too easy to think that where you live is how the world is, when that is certainly not so,
Definitely, yeah.
So, yeah, I've trying to immerse ourselves as much as possible wherever you go.
How old are your kids at the moment?
I've got a 7-year-old and an 8-year-old, and she turned 8 last few weeks ago.
Okay, I won't tell her.
And a 10-year-old who's turning 11 in a couple of months before we go again. So,
oh, that's a great age. So what kind of things do they like about travelling, do you think?
Not being in school.
Fair point.
That's one thing. Look, I'm hoping the little one, the younger one, the 8-year-old, like she first went when she was 4, and then she went again when she was 6, so she'll go again now when she's 8, and like it was pretty hard for her, I think, just because, well, not really, because she was just at that age where she wasn't totally interested in anything, like unless you wanted to go to a park or a theme park or somewhere like that, which is fine, which we always try and mix that sort of stuff into what we're doing, obviously, because it's not just about us in the end. So, when we plan things, you always have a look to see if there's a theme park or stay near a park or a beach or, something like that that's fun for them. But the older one, she's very much like me and my wife. She actually likes history and she watches documentaries, and so she's happy to go to castles and learn about the history of places and things like that. So, which is really good. So I'm hoping that the younger one, being a bit older again this time, will show a bit more interest in everything that's there, different foods, instead of just saying, can we go to McDonald's, or can I have chicken nuggets? Can I have ice cream? And that sort of thing. So that's my hope at this time. But, look, wherever we go, we sit there. Well, we don't sit them down when walk, and I try to look things up, try and explain the history of places to them and things that have happened, within reason, and and I hope they take it in.
I'm sure they do. I mean, especially your nearly 11-year-old, if she's interested in history and stuff anyway, that must be just a really great experience for her.
She loves it. So, and I'm an early riser, so me and her, I wake her up early and we go out and go walking around the cities early in the morning before people get out and things like that. And
that's the best time to see a place. How cool.
It is. I'm always up early I'm up early riser here, but when I'm in Europe, I get up early too. And I love going out for a walk and taking photos while there's not a million people in the pictures, and things like that. So, which is really good. I don't know how I'll go this time when it's snowing
really
and
cold
cold.
and dark.
I just walk out the door and go, no, thank you. I'm going to turn around and go back inside. But
yes, it might not be quite as attractive as usual, but still,
well, that's it. I think we're starting the first month we're there. We're in Spain and Portugal, so it won't be as cold.
Since Mark and I recorded that chat, they have, of course, been on this additional European odyssey of theirs. And, of course, the kids had a ball, and I'm pretty sure they learnt a fair bit as well. So thank you very much for listening to episode 54 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. I'm fairly confident that most of you, if not all of you, would agree with me that there are multiple benefits to travelling with kids, both for the kids and their parents. Yeah, there are a few drawbacks, like those long plane trips with a crying baby, but fortunately, all babies grow up and they do stop crying. Mine now is more than happy to sit with that sudden gift of unlimited screen time during a flight, and he actually is probably a way better flyer than me these days. So it's good to know that those things do change, because flying with babies and toddlers is not the best part of travelling with kids, I must admit. Anyway, if you want to hear a little bit more about it, look up some of our old episodes. So back in episode 8, we talked about travel with kids and kids on travel. That was the episode where I interviewed actually my son and his 2 older cousins. And, of course, the 3 of them who have been lucky enough to travel quite a bit all agreed that travelling is definitely good for kids, as did all my guests in episode 19, which was called Travelling with Kids is Good for Everyone. So I'll leave some links in the show notes to those 2, or you can just look them up in iTunes under episode 8 or episode 19. So thanks so much to my wonderful guests for their contributions to today's episode. First up, we chatted with Natasha Lester, And you can find Natasha's site at natashalester.com.au. She now has a new novel out. It's historical fiction set mostly in New York between World War I and World War II, basically. I just read it last week and it was amazingly, fabulously brilliant. I passed it on to my mother, who read it within 2 days and rang me to say, could you please ask Natasha when she's going to get another one out? I happen to know it's another year away, Mum, so you'll have to wait. But anyway, thank you, Natasha. So her new novel is called Her Mother's Secret, and I will leave a link to that in the show notes as well. After Natasha, I chatted with Alicia Nelson of the Prairie Style File, which is all about what's beautiful and what's happening in the upper Midwest and the prairie provinces of Canada. So a beautiful part of the world that I don't know much about and would love to get to. Alicia's also got a book coming out, North Dakota Beer, A Heady History. It's coming out in July this year. I don't have a link for it yet, but I will add it in when I get one. And last but definitely not least, I chatted with Mark Wyld of Wyld Family Travel. You can find him at wyldfamilytravel.com. Wyld there is WYLD. If you have an opinion about travelling with kids that you'd like to share with us, why don't you pop over to the Facebook group, search for Thoughtful Travellers in Facebook, or head to the link in the show notes. You can also catch up with me on Twitter at Amanda Kendall. Use the hashtag ThoughtfulTravelPod. And all of these details are going to be in the show notes. And for this episode, the show notes are at notaballerina.com/54. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.
Jackrabbit FM for your ears.
Who is that? Hi, Podcast.